Hello and welcome to those of you who are just coming in. Glad to have you here. We're going to wait just about 2 minutes before we get started on our IRB update, what faculty need to know. So bear with us while we um, open up the room to folks who are coming in. We did have several registrants, almost 100, and we're used to getting less than that in the meetings. But if we're talking about 30 or 40 people, we'd still need a few minutes to get everybody in. I don't have the view of the entire gallery, so I can see people as they pop in. But at about 2 minutes after, so here in just another minute and a half or so, I'll start the content and we can welcome those people as they come in. So thanks for coming, everyone. We are using the chat function to allow you to introduce yourself or make comments. We are also using the Q&A function. So if you have questions, we'll describe that here in a second. Please enter them there. But feel free to enter in the chat where you're logging in from or calling in from. Any other info you'd like to share. It's always nice to read where people are and how widespread everybody associated with the NU community is. Keep seeing people popping into our room. For those of you that are just coming in, welcome. And we'll be starting at 2 minutes after, just to give people a few minutes to get in. If you'd like to enter into the chat where you're from, or where you're calling in from, or where you're from. I'm not calling in for where I'm from, so you could list all the places you've lived if you wanted to. Mine would be a little too long, but welcome everybody. We are almost to our start time, and I'm going to jump into our presentation. We have help here that I'll be introducing in just a second, but as a reminder, today's IRB update for faculty, kind of what you need to know, and we want to briefly go through the elements in the description here, including our resources and some faculty-specific elements as well to the process. So welcome, everybody. And as we get started, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Chad Becker. I'm an IRB education analyst. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I'm calling in from where I've lived for over 20 years in Terre Haute, Indiana. And we have Dr. Kelly Tribble, an IRB education analyst with the IRB as well. Dr. Tribble, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Kelly Tribble. Nice to meet you all if I haven't met you yet. And I'm over here in Tyler, Texas at the moment. Well, that's where I live. But I've also lived around, wherever we have to move around a lot and keep one step ahead of the law. So we're okay. Nice to see everybody.
And we do have this update webinar. You may hear me call it both of those. We're recording it. We'll have it on our webpage. We'll have it available through our YouTube channel. We're going to create a question and answer document from the questions and answers that we give throughout our update. And I will also provide the PowerPoint slide that I'm using, which is hyperlinked, as you can see. So there are a few useful pages for launching from to resources and services, etc. So I will send an email within 2 days with PowerPoint slide presentation with the Q&A and the link to where we host the video. You can use the chat function to introduce yourself and to chat with each other. And we ask that you use the Q&A function to ask questions. What we're going to try to do is answer questions throughout. So I will stop every 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the content, and ask Dr. Tribble if there's any questions that seem to be useful for the rest of the crowd. And we'll move through it that way. I do have a little bit of content, so you'll see me flipping through slides quickly at times. But those are really just views of our website, so I don't want to spend too much time on those. The more substantive slides we'll talk about for a bit longer. So our overview today is to talk about not only the IRB, kind of what we do briefly, but also why we're doing this update. We have some key information about our resources and services I'll share with you, and then a few content topics to talk about, including feasibility concerns, in general, and then include specifically site permission, which is what we see some confusion on from both our student investigators and our faculty investigators and our faculty chairs and faculty mentors. So this presentation is generally directed toward faculty, but if you're just a faculty member who's researching rather than working with dissertation students, there is still a lot to get from this presentation. So I'll be mixing between talking to you as a potential researcher, but also as a faculty member who may be working in master's level classes where there's an IRB requirement, or doctoral level programs, terminal degree programs, where you're either a dissertation chair or a faculty mentor. We're going to talk about the informed consent process, which is another area that a lot of people need our help with. And you'll see from our resources and services what we mean by that. That's a large part is devoted to that process. So I'm going to explain it a little bit and show you where our resources are. And then we're going to look a little bit at the application for faculty mentors and chairs. There's a component where you'll need to be able to go into our application system and certify your students' work. So we want to make sure we go through that. Before we get started, just wanted to welcome everybody who's come in. Looks like our waiting room has calmed down a little bit. If you want to use the chat to introduce yourself, please use the Q&A for any questions that you have throughout the session. So our purpose, what is an IRB? Well, we're kind of mandated by federal regulation called the Common Rule. It's linked here if you'd like to read it, and it's essentially to protect the ethical welfare of human subjects in research. What we're not is a committee that would guide regarding any programmatic for students or any academic or methodological aspects of research, unless those components themselves present the risk to human subjects. So sometimes we have students who will come and ask us, well, what should I do for data collection, or what should I do for methodology choice? And we'll say, well, please, go discuss that with your chair, your committee, your faculty sponsor. And unless, of course, what they're choosing to do would pose a risk to the human subjects, then we will weigh in on that. So just briefly, we tried to stay out of the faculty's way and ensure that risk to human subjects is what our considerations center upon. Purpose of this update then is to help avoid any non-compliant student applications, and I'll talk to you about what that word means. And the faculty are in a perfect position to help us with that compliance. So non-compliance issues don't include things like incomplete applications or, a missing template or an improper use of a template. Those are things we can help with. What they include rather are risks often to minors or vulnerable populations. So we are not asking faculty to be IRB reviewers. We know that that's not your job. But there is an institutional need to help us from keeping PIs moving forward prematurely, especially with risky subjects, risky topics and population choices, because we don't want to be out of compliance as an organization if somebody goes and does something that's sort of against regulations, especially without having gone through our process. So we'll talk about that process here today. Some examples of non-compliance are actions that can be taken by any PI, but since here we're talking about faculty, student PIs, any actions taken prior to approval or sometimes even prior to application submission, uh, including but not limited to these types of elements. So site permission, utilizing it, actually going and accessing what you've been given permission to access before you even submit or have an approved application. Recruiting people before you have approval. We've seen those. Uh, Same with parental consent and minor assent. I'm sorry, parental permission, consent, and minor assent. So we see people moving forward in the process before they have our approval to do so, and even collecting data. We have seen that certainly several times. So these would be issues that rise above just not filling out the application correctly, right? These are issues of non-compliance with federal regulations that we need to make sure we keep an eye on for. Some key information about our IRB is that all community members can use our resources and services at any time. And that includes students of all types, faculty, staff, administrators. We have a few caveats for student PIs. Well, actually, this isn't a caveat. This is actually great. They get to use the IRB resources at any point in their programs. They do not need to be in a course that's labeled IRB, and specifically some of our terminal degree students in these specifically numbered courses. They don't have to be in those courses to utilize our resources and services. To apply, they have to have an approved proposal, which of course can't really come until those courses listed there. And if it's a master's student, the faculty member would have to, sign off that they approved their prospectus or their research plan. If it's a NU community member, a faculty member, or a staff member who's doing their own research, make sure that you and your co-researchers are agreed upon all the important elements of the study. I want to show you the website briefly. Here is just a screenshot of what you're going to see in a second, just so we can bounce around and I can show you where the information I'm describing in this presentation today is located. Here is our homepage, and we have our tabs set up in a sequential order from when you're getting started with us, what you need to learn at first, and then how maybe you can receive help on preparing documents. So for any PI, especially student PIs, we see that these pages about consent, about eligibility criteria, about recruitment are really important for helping them get started with their application and the supplemental documents that have to be included with their application. We have services that I'll talk about here in a few seconds, group sessions. About some of those topics that I just showed you, we have office hours. And again, any researcher, any potential principal investigator, PI can use these services. So faculty, staff, administrators, students of any kind. We have a faculty resource page, and I just want to bounce to that really quickly so that you can see that we have some guidance, we have some direction, and then we also have some access to help materials. We'll be coming back to a screenshot of this page to show you some of this a little more specifically. But as you can see, these are documents that can help you review and certify a submission, help your student understand how to respond to comments, and to even get into the program if needed. All right, back to our presentation. Before we get started, though, any questions that may have arisen yet, Dr. Tribble, that would be useful for the group?
Nope, it's all clear at the moment.
This was just review of our kind of basics. So please do let us know if you have any questions. Here on this page, this is more of a launching pad for our resources. I've shown you some of these just now, but I've also linked you to each of the pages through these hyperlinks for getting started with us. So there's a handful of tasks that it's useful for any researcher to begin with. One of that is city training, but there's a couple of other basic things that you should do before you do anything else with the IRB. So we want you to also think about some of the requirements that are university requirements, special guidance that's federal requirements regarding certain populations, military, international research. The preparing IRB documents like your consent form or your recruitment material, and then links to services like our office hours and group sessions that I'll show you a little bit more about on the next slide, and a growing number of help materials that are either documents or short 2 to 3 minute videos about different aspects of the IRB application or the construction of these materials. We have our YouTube channel where all of our updates and our webinars are housed if you want to go peruse any of those. And on our website help material page, we also have all of the PowerPoints and Q&As from previous updates and webinars like we'll have for you after this one. You may have seen our newsletters come out from the Provost. We just had one come out for today for the next 2 months. So some good information on those. The services then that are regularly occurring and self-schedulable. So these are for anyone at the university, including students. We have a site that I showed you where you can go to sign up for group sessions on eligibility criteria, recruitment materials, and consent materials. And participants in those can submit a draft for review. So they're really quite useful. We give about a 20-25 minute presentation about those topics. And then because the groups are small, we can go through the feedback for everybody and then send it to them as well. And those are really important for getting it right before you submit the application. We have an application group session that doesn't involve submitting anything, but you can see us go through the application and explore the different parts of it, the requirements, how to submit it, these kinds of things. So that's good for students to pass along to students as well, or for yourself if you're interested in using the IRB for the first time here at NU. We have the office hours. You can speak one-to-one with one of our staff, and that can be quite useful for people anywhere in the program. We do kind of ask that people look at the website, go through some of our information before signing up for office hours, but we often get introductory type questions as well as quite advanced ones in office hours. So please feel free to register for those hours. And we do have a page about our webinars that I had mentioned, so you can go and find the information from our previous meetings like this. So our first real topic today is to discuss a little bit about feasibility and, how possible is it for you or your student to do the research that's being proposed? The practicality of it, the likelihood of successfully completing a study. Now, this involves assessing, can it be conducted? Can it actually be done? Can it be done ethically? And can it be done given the constraints that might be involved in, say, a program, or if you're researching teachers who might be finishing the school year, something like that. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of common feasibility subjects. And I just want to briefly go through those. We did recently do a whole webinar about feasibility. So if you're interested, please go view that or review the resources that we have for that. And you'll see a much more in-depth conversation about each of these topics. But generally, for topic selection, is the topic too broad? Is it too complicated? Is it too time consuming? Is it too risky for the person who's conducting, for the people who are potentially participating in the research? Another one is special populations. There are vulnerable populations that are federally kind of described as children, people who are incarcerated, and some pregnant people, depending on the study. So, of course, vulnerable, but also special populations. We have special populations that risk needs to be considered regarding uh, maybe along racial or ethnic identities, sexual or gender identities, and possibly cognitive, intellectual, or developmental abilities. So, not just vulnerable, but special populations can make for risky studies. We have socio-cultural contexts. Sometimes people will collect demographic information when they really don't need to. So considering, is this necessary for the study? And then any DEI concerns that might arise, such as access to archival data that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's been removed from federal websites or other places. Perhaps the study is too risky for specific populations because of the cultural situation in which they exist. So taking those into consideration when you're thinking about ethical human subjects research is important as well. We have possible, site permission we'll talk about here in a second more fully, but we have the possibility of multiple IRBs being involved, and that can make the approval process elongated. So making sure you understand what both IRBs want from each other. We have several paths forward, including conditional approvals, or we take other IRBs, approvals, and we essentially go along with them because they are federally wide assured. So there's a couple of different considerations. If you have multiple IRBs, these are good topics of conversation for our one-on-one office hours. And then also we have program-based research requirements. So is there enough time to get the study done in the constraints of, say, an 8-week class or a 12-week class? or possibly a series of classes for some students. So those are all considerations that have to do with feasibility. Can this study actually be done? I apologize if the reminders keep coming up for you. I should dismiss those next time. The second thing we have is a worksheet. So we have a screenshot here of the feasibility and benefits checklist, which is linked from the website that I have highlighted here. It's our Get Started website. So we want people to jump onto this early so that they don't go down a path of unfeasibility for too long before they realize that they need to make some changes. So we have this checklist that can be used by any principal investigator to go through the different elements of the study, ask yourself these questions, write down your notes, and then make an informed decision potentially with your faculty or with your colleagues, potentially with you as their faculty mentor, and help them determine if their study is in fact feasible. All right, well, that's a kind of an important topic. So let me stop and ask if there's any questions in the chat or the Q&A at this point.
There are none at this point, so it's
Okay,
either
great.
extremely clear or people are trying to gather their thoughts.
Either way, I think we're okay. So uh, appreciate people being here, and some of this may be review for those of you that have worked through the IRB or have come to our other presentations. But I think we have also some interesting stuff that you may not have seen in this presentation. So we have a little bit of blend. Site permission is kind of another concern that we get with student submissions, other submissions as well, but student submissions will often uh, kind of make the site permission process a little more complicated. So generally, this is true of all studies, that site permission needs to be included in the application. And sometimes uh, mentors and chairs don't realize that. And they say, you can't get that yet. That you have to wait until you get IRB approval. Well, of course, we need to see that you have the site permission. So it has to be included in the application. And it doesn't constitute reaching out to any participants, just reaching out to the resource owner for access to what will help you reach out to participants. So site permission is what you show us so that we know that right, the investigator has access to the resources that they will then access after IRB approval. Sometimes people confuse site permission with recruitment, so we want to make sure to differentiate those. It can refer to physical sites, but the term also applies to virtual sites, other private resources. So anything in this list would be considered a private resource and need permission in the application from an authorizing figure. Things like in a closed group, perhaps we have a private contact list, any resources of an organization like email addresses, if they're not public, that you wouldn't have access to if you didn't work at that place, for instance. They're not yours, so you need permission for them. Um, Government sites, anything like that, and then certainly anything international would need a site permission included with it. I did see a hand go up, and I'll just ask as a reminder to type your question into the Q&A if possible. If not, we'll have time at the end, hopefully, for anybody who doesn't have that function to ask their question. But did anything come through there, Dr. Tribble?
Just one person commenting that they often find that site permission sometimes will not be granted until after they received IRB approval from us.
Right. So there is a situation in which a site permission provider will sort of say, "Hey, we'll take a look at your study and provide that site permission as long as we know that everything else is in order." And so they will want to withhold that permission until IRB approval. If that's the case, the IRB offers a conditional approval determination, which will give you a letter, your student a letter that they can then send to the site permission grantor. a simple modification to the study will allow you to add the site permission, allow the student to add the site permission, and it will be off and running. So a conditional approval can help us around the site permission. This is often something we run into with the multiple IRBs as well, conditional approvals. So we have these mechanisms for how to move around these barriers. It's better to be informed ahead of time if you have a study that requires any kinds of special considerations like this. So useful for yourselves as faculty mentors, faculty chairs, and faculty researchers to know this so that you can work on your own research as well as help your students through theirs. Thank you for the question. All right, so we're through site permission. Now we're going to get into recruitment and consent. Now, we call that together informed consent. So when you hear the term informed consent, it doesn't just mean a consent form or a consent letter. It means the process that we go through from when we begin to reach out to people till when the study is done. So we're informing them about the study and then we're gaining their consent to participate in the research. It's a combination of recruitment and consent. How you reach out to people or recruit them after getting any needed permissions and getting our approval, and how you gain authorization from them to participate, which is consent, are two different parts, but they're linked as part of the same process. It's ongoing all the way through the study. So you don't just get it and it's over. If somebody decides they don't want to continue in the study, that's their right. So informed consent may lead to a yes, but they may choose to walk away at any point. So it is really an ongoing process throughout the entire certainly data collection phase as well. And you can only begin with recruitment and consent after IRB approval. So site permission comes in with the application. If we need to do a conditional situation to get all of the ducks in a row, we do that. And then once the IRB approval is reached, you or your students can begin to recruit and gain consent. Now, recruitment this is a screenshot from our website. So if you follow directions from earlier by dropping down a couple of those menus, you'll see the recruitment page, and this is some of the information on that page. If you're using human subjects, you're going to need a recruitment material. It's as basic as that. If you're doing an archival data study, that's not going to need right a recruitment material because it's already gathered and you don't need people for your study. But most of the research that we see, and certainly most of the research we see through our dissertation students, does involve human subjects research, which means there's going to be a recruitment material and process. You can see on the left-hand side, we have different templates depending on where the recruitment is taking place. Social media, is it an email? Is it going to be something for an anonymous online survey, or is this something for, say, interviews where you're going to know who your participants are? We have some examples, and then we'll get down to the other templates here in a few minutes. But generally, recruitment is using one of these templates. Okay, and here's an example of the letter template where you can see that we have some directions that help our investigators fill them out correctly. So here's the direction section of the template, and then here's the template itself. And you can see that the highlighted areas are where our investigator would replace the highlighted directions with their own study information. So we really try to make this easy. We create these templates. We help people understand how to use them in our group sessions, and then we'll even review them in those group sessions before submission of your application. You could certainly come or have your students come after they submitted their application if they need help, but clearly it's more efficient if needed to get the help ahead of time. So that's recruitment. Templates are generally laid out this way with directions at the top and then this templatized language for the PI to use. We have these typical ways of recruiting: email, social media posts, flyers, less common phone calls and presentations, but we have seen those. Social media posts sometimes involves the investigator's own page. So whether that be on LinkedIn and they're just reaching out to their member groups, or if it's on Facebook and they're just reaching out to their friends, or it might be they want to post it in a large online social group that someone else runs, something about teachers or something about, being a police officer, something like that. They can have tens of thousands of members. Those are private resources, and you would need a site permission to access them. Usually they have pretty clear directions about soliciting on them, and most of them don't like soliciting. If it says explicitly that they don't mind uh, uh, that people do those types of recruitment activities, then that's fine. Just need to show us that or have a permission from a mediator, a moderator, or an owner of the group. Email, same thing. Sometimes people will say, I'm just going to email all the people that I've known for all the years that I've worked in the biz. And that's fine. If you keep your own Rolodex of emails and you have them, you can do that. If you can find people's emails on a public website, you don't need permission for that. But if you're using an organization's email list, something like that, then you would need a permission from an authorizing figure. All right, so that's recruitment. Any questions coming through the Q&A at all about that, Dr. Trill?
No, I think we're okay. I
All
think
right,
we're okay. Yep.
moving on to consent then. So your participants, your students, participants, they've been recruited. They've said, I'm interested. The next step is to gain their consent to then gain their data. So again, here's our web page with about consent in the Prepare IRB drop-down menu. And you can see that we have a couple of different templates as well as an examples form. Now this is for adults, right? So far we're talking about people who are 18 or older in the United States. And this is for typical studies that we see where you want to gather new data from the person. Survey, questionnaire, interview, focus group, something like that. So this is typically what we see, and these are the typical materials that we use for that. We'll get into some atypical ones in a few minutes, but let's run through the typical consent material and process. Using one of these templates, then, after the person has been recruited, then you would share one of these consent templates, one of these consent forms that you filled out using our templates. So here's again directions at the top of the form and an example of the form where you can fill in, your students can fill in their names and the specific criteria and research activities, etc., for their study. And then, of course, we would expect to see the recruitment material or materials. We would expect to see the consent material in the application so that we can understand the entire process and make sure that it is being completed correctly. So this would be another element that goes into the application. We do have quite a few studies that come through from disciplines that work with children. So briefly going to go through research with minors. If you are conducting research with minors, 17 or younger, then you would need recruitment materials and parental materials and child material. So I'm going to go through what that means. The first thing that you're going to do is recruit parents first. So if you're working with a student or you yourself are researching, say in a school, or say children who are school age, you would first need to reach out to their parents. And if their parents, are interested, they'll let you know through that recruitment material that they are. And at that point, so you'd use your parental recruitment template. At that point, then you would gain parental permission. So making sure that you take a look at our website, have your students take a look at our website for these templates so that they get the parental permission form correct. Third step would be to recruit the minor. So we've got parental permission, we've got, parental recruitment, and then we get their permission. Now we need to recruit the minor. So if we want to post social media, maybe flyers, maybe go into a rec center, after school center and recruit in those ways, this would be where you would have your student describe that plan. And then the fourth step would then be to talk to the minor to gain their assent. So assent and consent are essentially the same. One is for adults, one is for minors. So they would be assenting to being in your study after the parents' permission had already been given. And so we have templates for how you reach out to minors depending on how old they are. Different groups obviously read at different levels. So that's a traditional study involving minors. But there's an option for a non-traditional type of study where you're researching minors in a normal educational setting. And sometimes we see teachers want to research their own students, principals want to research students, things like this. So if, and we have an information letter that you would fill out, and you can see that it takes the place a little bit of all that other work that I had just described. So for a study that qualifies as a normal educational activity or setting study, it of course needs to be, the boxes here in the green, you can read it needs to meet those requirements. And then instead of using parental recruitment, parental permission, minor recruitment, and minor assent, you would simply have an information letter to send home from that normal educational setting. So if it's a classroom, the teacher, maybe the teacher's the researcher, maybe the teacher is a teacher, or the researcher is a co-teacher, maybe the researcher is the guidance counselor at the school. However it works out, if it's a normal educational setting, the students would be given the information letter to go home. Maybe it would be sent out through the communication system of the school or the district. And then the parents would have the opportunity to opt their child's data out of the study. Now, it's a normal educational setting, so the student's going to do it anyways, but whether or not their data is included would be determined by the results of the information letter process. So that sometimes is confusing for students who want to research in schools. Many times they want to interview people. Many times they want to observe them, and they want to maybe mix elements that aren't part of the normal educational setting, but are part of it, and it can be a little confusing. So in those scenarios, we make sure to reach out or have your student reach out early so that we can help guide the study to make it one or the other. And of course, the second option with the information letter is the easier option. So if there's a way to make a study in schools with children work, it's easier than pulling them out and interviewing them individually through the parents' permission. Right? So, um, I'm going to just keep going because I'm not seeing any questions, I think, coming in, Kelly. So you can just let me know if we have any. And briefly here, then I want to show you kind of what our application looks like. So now we have constructed all of the supplemental documents. There's an approved proposal, or as a faculty member, you have a research plan in place, created the application, and have submitted all of the necessary information. So in our application, we have text windows that you have to type into. We also have areas that you will upload documents to. And as you can see from this rather typical application, there are several sections that need to be completed, including those about the general info, the objectives, the design, and then we get into recruitment, informed consent, and other elements that we need to know about in order to determine the level of risk to the participants. So on this particular view of the adults recruitment, you can see that there are choices to be made with radio buttons, as well as places for the uploading of documentation. In this case, there's going to be an email recruitment material, so that's listed here. The page on consent would have, how are you consenting? Some radio buttons, and then a place for you to upload the student to upload the consent material. And some pages don't have any uploads, they just have text windows. It just depends on the type of study and what you're choosing as you move through the application will determine what other sections open up. So if you're doing a simple analysis of existing data, you might only have 2 or 3 sections in your application because we don't need as much information as someone who's doing a full research study with human subjects that might even involve special populations or something like that. When a student or yourself are completing an application, it's not submittable until all the check marks are there. So the check marks only appear once all of the questions have been asked. I'm going to talk to you about how to certify your student submission here in a second, and this will be a key component for you to look for as you move through the application. You know, is there anything missing? So it can't be submitted without check marks, but sometimes that doesn't mean that everything is on the page that needs to be. So when a PI sees their application is complete with all of the check marks, then they are able to submit that application. So when they do so, that means that it's sent to their faculty mentor or chair. So for those of you in the room who do have terminal degree students who are writing dissertations, they'll submit and certify their application once it's complete, and then you'll see it. So an email will come to you, you open up the link, you'll see what I just saw there, exactly what the student sees, and then you'll go through it and check it. Now, uh, we're looking for you to ensure that the answers match what you think should be in there, right? So you've read the proposal, been working with them. You should be able to kind of look at their answers and make sure that they're saying similar things to what's in their proposal. And then sometimes students will go do things without the chair knowing. So if you see anything in there, like, well, I've already gone and recruited people or something like that, then that would be a time for you to reach out to us and not certify, right, the submission because of that non-compliant issue. Also, possibly there could be some elements that are missing that should be there. And this can really help with efficiency's sake so that it doesn't come to us, go through a review and go back to them and it's something simple like, oh, I left that off, or I didn't answer this question fully. When you, as the chair, could clearly just help them with that before it reaches us. So it's important to think about what you can do for your student in this phase rather than just push it along to us because it takes longer to push along to us. Okay. So, how to certify an application? Now your student has fully submitted. It's come to you. We have I showed you this screen grab from our webpage in the faculty resources area of the website, and we do have two different documents, and it really just depends on how you get into the Cayuse system. If you're someone, actually, I think that all NU faculty members have access to the NU instance of Cayuse for their own research and for working with students who may come from traditional NU programs. But some of you may have students that are in legacy programs from North Central University that merged with National University about 2.5 years ago. And if that's the case, then you'd be logging in differently to the system. So it depends on the student and if they are a NU researcher or an NCU, legacy NCU researcher. And then everything else is the same. So the first page of these documents is different because the NU people will use the Okta single sign-on that you're probably familiar with. The NCU people or people who are still working with students in NCU programs, let me make that clear, would use kind of what we call, I think, the D2L NCU1 login. Okay, so that's the only difference. Once you get in there, the directions for how to actually certify an application are the same. Very simple, click through, say I certify. So it's just a matter of scrolling through the application, taking a brief look at the elements, making sure that it's complete and consistent with what you expect it to look like. And then it goes off to us. So you can see here we have a little chart. First one is IRB submission. So the left-hand column is true for any principal investigator. The second column is for student principal investigators, and that's where you as a chair or faculty mentor would come in. You can send it back to them, or you can certify it and send it to us. So that's a kind of a decision point. It goes back to the student. They're notified. You can enter comments in that say, do this, change that, add this, and then it'll get resubmitted and come back to you where you can certify it. Once it's certified, it moves to our pre-review. That takes about 2 days, where we do the same thing. We make sure that it's appropriate, complete. We don't know the proposal, so we can't do it in the same way, but we often find things that are missing. In order to expedite the process, we don't make it go through the full review if we can look at it quickly and see that there's something that's not right. So the pre-review takes 2 days, bounces it back to the student or to the NEPI if there's something needed. If not, it's assigned to a reviewer. So now we're in this middle area here, IRB review. And that's where one of our analysts will take a full look at everything and review the document, review all the documents, review the application. They will either send it back, so ask for changes, or they will move it to the next step, which is post review. These two steps take just a couple of minutes, sending of automatic messages to both the faculty chair and sponsor and the student, so that you know that there's been approval with an approval letter. If changes are needed, just go back and forth with that analyst until it's done. So this can take a little bit of time. The estimated time frame for a fully certified, submitted and certified by both the student and the chair is 2 to 3 business days. But quite honestly, I think our working time period is more like 1 to 2 business days on that. And then if it's deemed incomplete, it'll be returned. Once it's determined to be reviewable, then we have an estimated 7 to 10 business day turnaround time for a review. So keeping those timelines in mind and thinking about the sophistication of the study, how complex it is, how many different materials might be needed, is all part of the feasibility of helping students through programs. Now, it's not just, it's not best to just do the easiest projects, but it is important to acknowledge that this is a capstone project for a degree, and that it's important to think about these timeline restrictions that students have. So knowing this, then we can kind of reverse back. When do we have to have it submitted? When does the proposal need to be fully completed to help people with their timelines? All right, so that's our presentation for today. We'll certainly stay on if you have any questions. You can follow up through our email address, which a couple of us see. So whoever's best suited to reply will reply within 2 days. And then please consider using our website and the resources and services that are available there, not only for your own work, but also for your work with students. So any questions in the Q&A at the moment, Dr. Tribble?
No, we do not. Everybody seems to be well informed and on their way. So,
Wonderful. Well, hopefully it was useful, and thank you all for coming. We're going to end the webinar recording right now, and then I will stay on. And if there's any questions,